the whole thing that people forget when it comes to generative AI is the idea of multimodal. You show people a bunch of ads and then you ask them just like, hey, which ad did you see for which brand? And they see that like brand characters or mascots are 9 times more effective than, for example, a logo. So when you see an ad with a logo versus when you see an ad with a character, 9 times more chance that you recognize and remember the ad after when there was a character in there. It's super effective.
Welcome to the KLIMB podcast. Today we're having Stef Hamerlinck from Alan, brand builder at Alan. And we're going to be talking a lot about brand design, of course, generative AI in branding. We're going to be talking also about how do you scale branding in a company like Alan, which is already quite a scale up today. And we're going to be talking about best practices, tools. So I'm sure you get a lot from this episode. Have a look at it and feel free to share this episode and drop some comments. Enjoy the episode. Thanks a lot, Stef, for being here. I'm so happy to have this KLIMB podcast episode with you. We've been chatting, of course, a bit before. And so, yeah, thanks for being here. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a pretty nice episode together. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, and thank you for coming all the way to Brussels.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, and I love this space, so I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. And so, as you know, I've launched this podcast series to talk about branding, marketing stuff. We can talk about growth. We can talk about pretty much anything we want. And the goal is to just have meaningful discussions with leaders, top voices from the industry, and so on. And when I reached out on LinkedIn, I saw that you had a pretty cool background. It felt like it could be a pretty good chat. And so the first thing, of course, I wanted to know about, and I don't know about it, so it's going to be a full discovery for me, is just to understand how did you end up pretty much in branding? So what's your story, even from your childhood? I mean, whatever you want to share.
All right, interesting. Well, I won't go that far as into childhood, although I'll probably say I love drawing, so maybe
Okay.
there's a starting point. I studied arts, so I was always drawn to creativity. And at some point, my brother actually started a small business selling websites and stuff.
Okay.
And he was like, "You want to join?" I was like, "Sure, whatever." Like we were just having fun. And I remember at the time it was very funny. Like we had this small brochure where it said like your logo, your identity, your website for €999. Like we thought like, let's be cheap, let's beat the market. And like was very funny, very amateuristic. But so, yeah, we had to start somewhere. We built that business and it slowly, gradually evolved. Like we got better clients, we got better at design, we got better at understanding pricing as well. And so at that business, I was always like the creative guy doing design. I did a lot of different stuff. Like I was always like, I didn't want to be put in any box. So I did motion design, 3D design, web design, logo design, illustration. Like I couldn't hold myself, which also kind of meant that I was never really good at any of those crafts, just kind of like okay-ish at all of them.
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with that. We can go back into that, why I think that generative AI is today enabling me to do that in another way. But anyway, so let's say I was always the creative guy, but when I was talking to clients, there was a lot of problems when it came to like understanding what they want. There was a lot of iterations, you know, the typical, oh my God, this client is being so hard on us, and why is that? And so I started to dig a bit deeper into, okay, so how can I get better at understanding what the brief is, what the problem is, what the challenge is? So I started doing these story sessions like with Post-its and stuff on the wall. And then I basically discovered that at some point, hey, actually I'm doing strategy work in some form, like discovery workshops and stuff. And so I got triggered by that, and I started digging deeper into the whole strategy space, brand strategy, discovered what that was. And I started becoming more and more of a strategist type of person. So at some point, I also called myself a brand strategist. No longer today, and we could talk about that as well. But I dug really deep into the whole brand strategy thing, started my own podcast to talk to people doing brand strategy to understand what is this about. And during that whole period, our agency also really shifted from like being a full service doing everything for everyone, kind of like one-stop shop, to really like a boutique branding agency where it was like we delivered a super qualitative strategy and then a very highly qualitative design or a brand identity, and then also sometimes some marketing campaigns linked to that. So that was Ollie back in the day. Together with my brother, we grew that agency to around 10 people. And then COVID hit and we both decided to do something else. And so I started working for a lot of brands, internationally, agencies and stuff. And then at some point, I also landed at Allen, what we can also talk about later. And today I would consider myself more of like a brand builder, which is like a sort of role that I invented for myself, where it's like, I'm not just doing purely strategic work. I'm actually building the brands through creative work, through design, through thinking of campaigns. So it's not just also brand identity design, it's also marketing. And that's why I try to find this new name for it, which for me is what I would consider a brand builder, is this hybrid person that thinks basically how can we grow a brand in the right way long term and have business impact.
Okay.
So that's where we are today.
Nice. So it makes me think of three. You mentioned several things. I just want to talk about first your design way of learning. Mm-hmm. The second thing to keep in mind is I wanted to talk quickly about scaling the agency, because I wanted to have your point of view, because it's going to help me also. And then we can, of course, move on to the brand builder part of at Allen. Just about the design, you mentioned that you did learn a lot of things on your own, but did you go to any kind of school, or what's your process of learning design and branding stuff? And as a designer, I know that it's an ongoing process; it never stops. But yeah, just curious about this.
Yeah. So I went to art school. And it was like a direction back in the time. I think it was called something like multimedia art or something like that. Basically, I felt like the teachers didn't really know what to teach us, because multimedia could be anything. So we could do a lot of stuff. So that was already like it. I was in the right place to be able to just learn a lot of different stuff. Like when I told my teachers like, hey, I want to do this thing in 3D, they were like, okay, that I went off on a tangent for a couple of months to dive deep into cinema 4D or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I use that.
Yeah. Voilà,
to make a YouTube 3D intros.
Sorry?
I did like a YouTube 3D intros for like YouTubers back in the days.
Voilà. So you know the drill. So like it was having the time first to learn a bit. I think like when I wasn't on the job but then of course on the job I kept learning. I don't know if I have a specific process other than just being extremely curious and just like trying stuff. I watched a lot of tutorials. I faked a lot of stuff like, oh, this looks like a cool render, or this looks like a cool logo. Let me try and remake it. And there was like a lot of hacking and like getting semi-good results. And like something I also really loved doing was with colleagues, like we did these things called render contests.
Okay.
Where it was like, okay, here's a basic idea. Maybe let's do an ad, Apple versus PC. Let's make a visual. We both have 30 minutes and come up with something cool. Nice. And then we would just post that on like
a hackathon.
Yeah, voilà. We would post that on whatever social media was hot back in the day. I don't remember. It's a while ago. But these things all kind of helped. Like, and also the fact that again, like when I had the agency with my brother, I also had quite some time and freedom to explore things on my own. Like it wasn't like it was a super rigid company where it was like the boss over my shoulder the whole time. So I guess in my whole career, I've always had the opportunity, or at least pushed for space for me to explore. And it's the same at Allen today. Like I was able to explore generative AI in a way that would have been hard in like a real 9-to-5, just do your job kind of situation. So I was able to go deep and experiment a lot, and that's how I learn, I guess.
You're helping me a lot with the transitions, and so talking about your small boutique brand studio and so on. Just a piece of advice for me, just in general. What do you think? What does it take to just bring a studio of 10 people? This is pretty much the size we're at KLIMB, to something way bigger, and to reach like scales of agencies like Koto and the ones we know about?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know, because we weren't there, but like there's a couple of things I think that are interesting to think about is, okay, when you scale, what will you be scaling? Like, and what won't you be scaling? Because the best work doesn't always come from like scaling stuff. I've worked in some agencies that grew a lot in the time that I worked there, and I saw like a bit of an evaporation of the culture that actually made sure that there was excellence in the work. So one thing I would just like think about is make sure that you are the guardian of whatever works today in your smaller boutique, and keep that spirit alive if possible, because it's the people and the interaction that makes the work really good and stand out, and that's what attracts new clients, and that's what keeps you growing. So that's one thing I would definitely think about. And the other thing is really like scaling how. I think like we actually made the mistake of at some point in the agency scaling it. I think it was like around 12 to 14 people. And it was like there was developers and designers and marketers and accounts and even an HR like person in our little company. And actually we invested too much in the headcount. And at some point what happened was like we were just constantly every month scratching our head like, okay, we need to get the payroll.
Yeah.
So let's get a lot of money in the door. Let's get clients. Let's get work, whatever work. And at some point it becomes more of a factory where like you need to get work in the hands of the people, and it's not anymore about like what clients do we really want, what is our next stepping stone, where are we going. So we scale it back to like I think 5 to 7 people, and we really thought about like what is the core team that we need to really deliver on what we did. At some point, if we didn't decide to stop, I think what I would do is rather think again from that core, maybe duplicate that core in different regions or something like that, where you basically, again, keep that essence of what is working and not fall in the trap of just like adding more people everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I've been thinking a lot about it. And I've seen like recently on LinkedIn some stuff also about, it's not really about agencies, but I think we can do some similarities. The fact that you have more and more companies that are built with a few number of people, like Lovable, I think,
Yep.
and others, I don't recall all the names. And you have this trend of having big, high revenue companies with like 20, 30 people internally. And I think even if it's about, even if those companies, they raise like tons of money and so on, I think the learning is still interesting about the fact that you don't need to hire too many people just because you just raise funds. And you sometimes, as you said, you need to focus on really what is your core. And if you need to delegate some things, maybe you can just externalize it and not have it internally. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about because, as I told you, I want to expand to London and build an office there. And my first thought was like, okay, we're just going to hire a salesman because we don't have any salesmen at KLIMB yet. And after really thinking about it, I was like, maybe that's not the good call, because for now, at the stage we are at, the only person that can scale the agency is pretty much myself with my own network and so on. And bringing just an external salesman into the agency, it's not just going to do the work. You're not going to have the same values. People are still buying my credibility and different stuff. And so I figured, okay, no, maybe the goal is to just hire like potentially just a designer in London or a designer in New York and have them scale the business as proper, skilled people in the discipline we address.
Yeah, and it makes me think of this. I think it's a quote from Blair Enns, who's like a more of a sales guru kind of guy, but he says like the sale is the sample. And so I think that's the problem, especially in agencies, creative services. Basically, whatever touch point you get first is the sample of the work you're gonna get. So if you, as a business owner, true and true what you're talking about, if you are the sample, you're going to be highly valued. People are going to want to pay to work with you and your company, but not to like, it can be a very good salesperson, but it's a salesperson. He's hired or she's hired to do that job specifically. And so the sale is the sample. And I think actually thinking about like your role is probably mostly generating new business, either through things like this, building awareness around your company, building content credibility, or just going out in the world and talking to the right people.
Yeah. Well, enough of KLIMB. The main topic, of course, is to talk about your role today. And so can you tell us, you mentioned brand builder at Allen. Is it like the official name? And if it's not, it's fine. But just to understand exactly pretty much what you do, if you have a team also, how do you organize yourself? And how also, because I know we're talking about branding, but branding has an impact on a lot of aspect of the business. It can be employer branding, can be even in the product, of course, especially at Allen. This is the core, one of the core thing is the product name is the same as the company name. And a lot of the value you get from the product is thanks to this little mascot that you can find everywhere. It impacts, of course, your marketing and sales. So how do you also interact with all of these different parts of the business?
Yeah, so like my journey started at Allen, like somebody reached out, like a good colleague, Dries, and he said like, hey, you want to come on board? We're looking for a content strategist. And that was already like a starting point for me where I said like, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for like a typical traditional content person, I'm not the one. I basically challenged the role that they hired me for. And I said like, okay, if you want somebody to come and build a brand, I'm happy to do that. And they were excited about that. I'm not sure if that's today still the case, but anyway, I'm still there.
I'm pretty sure it is.
The role, like I started first at Allen, like doing things like brand campaigns. So like maybe an interesting learning that I had also, and it's a mistake that maybe other people can learn from when they come into a company, because I wasn't used to coming into in-house roles as well. Like I had more of always the consultant or that type of role or agency role. Is I first started in this company thinking like, okay, what are the things that I really need to do here? Okay, we need to create brand awareness. So we're going to do a traditional brand campaign. I created a cool video with an ad agency. We put some money behind it and it tanked. It didn't work. And the reason I think it didn't work is because I didn't take enough time to really understand how brand was being built at Allen, how they see it, how they see the market, what are the principles, what is the culture, what does leadership believe in? And so it kind of tanked both because we didn't invest enough in it, but also because I didn't take the time to understand. I just came in with my own ideas and I projected them on that company, and that didn't work. So for me, that was already an interesting moment where it was like, okay, everything you thought you know so far, like being an external consultant, doesn't work in this way. So it was interesting for me, humbling for me also to learn, okay, let's start from scratch and let's just start seeing where we can actually start building brand from the ground up rather than like top down what I thought was working. And so I started where like the place where you would expect. I started with sales.
Okay.
Not doing sales, but asking sales like, how can I help? How can I help you? And they always told me like, yeah, well, when we come into a conversation, it's a bit hard for us if they don't know anything about us, if we haven't built any relationship. So yeah, obviously that's where brand comes in. I started thinking, okay, how can we go a step before sales, but not like 10 steps before, not like an awareness campaign somewhere on a platform. And so what I started doing was with organizing events, for example, like for HR people specifically, because that's the target audience. We started doing these really cool events where people came, the relationships were built. Sales was very happy with that. We started doing dinners, private dinners with prospects, like a lot of these things. And then at some point when I had a bit of proof around like initiatives and also, my competency as a marketer to do these things and do them successfully, we were able to scale to bigger activations. For example, at some point we did like the challenge, which was like a huge campaign for all the members where they could come and run with us the 20K in
Okay.
Brussels. But we had a few months where we trained all the members. So this was in the product. So again, not a traditional like brand building campaign where you think, okay, we need to reach as many people that don't know anything about us. Rather, we started thinking again from the ground up, okay, but what if we first work on like brand advocacy with our members? Like they're not talking enough about us because we are not doing enough with them. And so we started thinking, okay, let's do an activation with them and see how that impacts the brand. And so there's a lot of initiatives like building that portfolio of initiatives slowly, gradually, before moving on to the big brand typical stuff of like, hey, let's do a billboard campaign all over Paris or do a TV spot or whatever. So that's a bit like how I came into this role at Allen. And then let's say today, fast forward 3 years, I am working a lot more on like advertising.
Okay.
So we are doing a lot of ads, mostly digital, of course. Online advertising. I'm working mostly on like the creative videos where it's really about like grabbing the attention of the audience through our Mascot, through interesting stuff there, but also creating videos for like big campaign moments, big events and stuff like that. And then the other big part of my scope today, which is not like, again, a typical thing, is generative AI. I'm really helping the company like rolling out how generative AI can enable other Alleners to be creative at scale, to do it in high quality. An example of that is obviously where like today every Allener can just generate images with our Mascot. They look super nice. It's easy for them. They just have to ping a Slack bot. They get the image back in like a few seconds. And there's like hundreds of images being generated every day that land in sales presentations, in customer care conversations, obviously in ads, in marketing campaigns, everywhere. So like that's what it also was another unlock for me, was going from like individual work of like, hey, I want to make this really cool creative campaign, to like making processes that scale for the brand. And that's a bit that generative part where it's like, how can I educate? How can I build processes that allow other people to go out and spread the word in an on-brand kind of way.
Yeah, that's very nice. And how do you make sure that this content that is generated by the team is still on brand and that is potentially validated just in general? Because it's a big part of all companies having processes to validate work that is used either internally or publicly.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first, like. I think I have a bit of an other opinion about the fact that it doesn't need that much validation as we think. If the tools are built properly and the content already has a good starting point, but very concretely to like, for example, with image generation, what we do is like we have an LLM assistant in between the person asking for something and the final prompt that goes into the image generation. And that LLM basically looks at the assignment given by the person and already knows, for example, okay, Mascot can never have guns, show violence, these types of things, but also always hit the right color notes, always do this, always do that. So it's basically just wrapping your assignment in a way and then sending it to a prompt where we use like Flux, the open source image generation. There's a lot of tools like Lasco, which we talked about. We use Scenario, but there's a lot of different tools which all are built on the same thing, which is Flux. Or Stable Diffusion before that, but I think Flux is a bit better at this point. And so that's how these people can get like decent looking, high quality thing, because we have a buffer already built into that.
Going back to this brand builder, how do you just operate? Because you said that you are not just a brand strategist, you're a builder. And so do you have a dedicated team, or is it just you pretty much building and trying to empower as many people as you can?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely not in a traditional way where it's like me leading 5 people. That's also in part because Allen has a bit of an interesting culture where it's like everybody has ownership, and in a way that it's not, there's like a flat hierarchy, so you don't really have that traditional waterfall system. So in some projects, I can take ownership, I can take the lead, and there's 4 or 5 people working on it. and I can make the final decisions. I can steer them into a direction. In other projects, I'm just a contributor to somebody else taking the lead. So there's always this notion of you can take a project and really own that, and then you're the final decision maker. And just to give an example of that, where I think it's like it goes quite far. Like when the mascot originally it was like a 2D mascot. Well, first it was like a really wonky actual marmot looking thing. Then design studio came in. They also did like some really I think they did Airbnb back in the day, and some other design studio came in and they made a nice 2D mascot, but there was actually a lot of problems internally with like the fur in vector. It was very hard to deal with. But also like I felt like there was more, like we could do more with that mascot, especially when it would be 3D, because of like, you know, it would be more tangible, the storytelling, a lot of reasons why I believed let's do it. Obviously, there was also a problem linked to that because 3D was expensive back in the day. And like, do we want to go to a 3D studio for all of that? Anyway, I was able to lead that project. And even though like ownership and like a lot of people were like, hey, we're not sure about this. Like, I don't feel this is the right move. I was able to say like, no, this is the final decision. I'm going to push forward on it. And everybody said, okay, well, I will disagree and commit to your decision. And finally, everybody went along. And now this mascot is like a very big thing in the company. It was already there, but you know, the decision to level it up in that way specifically was something that I could decide and that other people could follow along. And so that's that example of ownership that goes pretty far. Like we call it radical ownership.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, distributed ownership and radical transparency. I'm hustling the principles here.
Okay. It makes me think of a book like it's called, I think, Radical Candor or something.
Yeah.
Can you share an example of something you're really proud of in the way you use generative AI today?
So we did a campaign. It was around Christmas, which was really fun. Where basically, for me, the main idea for this campaign was when I go to the generator and I type Alan Marmot dancing on a stage with a red hat, I click generate, and like 3 seconds later, there he is, like in 3D rendered, super nice. It's magic. Like it's a magical moment.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how can we scale this? Because actually, like most people don't interact with this type of technology on a daily basis. So I was thinking, can we scale this little moment into like a campaign? And obviously, if we can, then let's use our marmot, our mascot, because, you know, it's recognizable, it's a great asset. And so we built this campaign where people could generate a postcard, like it was end of year postcard. They entered the name of the person that they wanted to wish wishes to. Wow, that's a hard sentence. And then we also allowed them to give some freedom, like show this person, I don't know, in the snow, skiing, because maybe that's how they projected that person. And then they could also select a style, like maybe it was cyberpunk, maybe it was vintage, whatever. So it was a whole bunch of options that they got. And then they hit that button and they got like a really cool, interactive, shiny postcard. It was digital. Unfortunately, I wanted to do the physical one, but that wasn't possible yet. But they got this really cool postcard, and then they could just send that postcard to that person. And it was really cool because at the same time, of course, our mascot was being shared, and there was like thousands of cards being generated. I remember the servers were failing and people at Allen were like, Stef, what is happening? Like things are breaking here. Like what is happening? Oh yeah, we sent some emails to a million of people and they're all generating cards. So that was a really fun one to see, like the feed in the back end of just images being generated with our marmot with names on it in like totally unexpected scenery. And so that opened already like a whole world of opportunity for me, where it's like, okay, how can we go to a brand that is even more like almost collaborating with their audience than just like a one-to-many situation?
How do you convince, decision makers at Allen to invest in such a funny, just brand content? That's it. You know, it's not really related to ROI, and that's one of the key things. Mostly for marketers, they are struggling with brand decisions, because most of the time it's not something you can, it's not tangible. You cannot really understand how you get things from it.
The ROI.
Yeah,
That's a thing that comes up often everywhere. Well, first off, like I told you before when we were drinking coffee, like we're lucky in that sense that at Alan, Jean-Charles is like the
crazy
CEO.
about
He's like
brand.
invested in brand, so that's already a starting point. But still, like there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Of like, where are you going to invest your time? Is this the right campaign? Whatever, like we still have those discussions. We're a company that wants to scale, be profitable, etc. So it's obvious that we have those discussions. The only way I think that you can do that is by doing a lot of small initiatives that build up to something bigger. And so actually this was a quite small initiative. Like I had to make a lot of compromises. For example, like, okay, definitely not physical
Printing,
parts.
yeah.
Like in the technology, how are we going to do it? Like we basically built it without a lot of code. Like we built it with like a connection, like a bit of a Zapier kind of setup. So there was a lot of scrappiness, what we like to call it scrappiness, to building this campaign with basically like 2 to 3 people in like 2 to 3 weeks while still working on a lot of other stuff. So the ROI argument is more like, let's do it in the smallest possible way that it still brings a lot of delight and hopefully proves our point so that maybe next year we can scale it. And that's what we did with the events as well. Like, let's start with a small event, 30 people, make it very cheap, but like it shouldn't feel cheap, obviously. And then if the people are excited about it, let's build another one next year to 60 and then 120. And that's, I think the opposite thing where like, obviously there's a lot of arguments about the ROI of brand building. Like there's a lot of research from Peter Field, like the long and short of it. There's recently been an interesting paper called Entertain or Die, where they basically, they looked at companies and they created like an entertainment index, which like they score on a few attributes, how entertaining these brands are. And then they correlated that with like revenue and profitability. And the correlation was like
Insane.
overly like ridiculous. Like when you're an entrepreneur and you see that, in my head, you're like, okay, let's go all in on entertainment. And you see actually a lot of brands are doing that. They're building in-house studios. They're becoming almost like Netflixes. So obviously there's the arguments, but that doesn't really matter. Like that's what I told in the beginning, like you can't come to a company and say like, hey boss, there's a paper that says we have to invest in entertainment, so let's do it. It's not that easy. Like often you need to work from in the context of that company. And so if you are a brand manager or somebody at a company frustrated with like, I'm not able to do this fun stuff, I would say like start very small initiatives, build up like a body of proof, and over time obviously sprinkle in some proof here and there, like, hey boss, here's a cool paper. But don't go like high and mighty, like say we need to invest in brand because it's the holy grail and it will happen. Usually like people will just be like, yeah sure, but we need like cash flow today. And like there's a lot of other priorities. So I
get it. It makes me think of an example you mentioned, and it's something I saw a TikTok about it anyway. It's like a guy telling, what do you see on the Instagram or the reels or whatever of your local pizza place, and what do you see on the Instagram of Red Bull? And you clearly see, you clearly understand without even mentioning it that on the local pizza place, you're just going to see pizzas and that's it, just the product. And on Red Bull, you don't even see the product. Is just entertainment.
Yep.
It's just people doing crazy stuff. And I think it's a good example of to explain how you should invest pretty much in your brand. And it's about entertaining people, at least on social platforms.
Yeah.
So
and I want to go deeper into that, because I think like we really underestimated, like especially like in digital advertising, there was like the pendulum swung too far in the sense that like we became overinvested in performance marketing because of, obviously, it was easy to attribute it's really not, but people at least saw clicks and conversion. So they
Yeah.
say, okay, see, we invested that much money.
The
we're
big
getting
red
that out.
button works.
But it's not the case. Like it doesn't work that way. But the at least that was the illusion that was created by the platforms because they are earning a lot of money with it. But the reality is like that you have to, invest in gaining attention from an audience that doesn't know you yet, and that takes time and that takes entertainment, like to get there.
And the one thing also is, I think it's just too important to really look at the opportunity, as you said. And if you are a 3D designer, you're an illustrator, and you're seeing this coming your way, you just have to really embrace it. And the opportunity doesn't really rely sometimes on just the execution of the work. And there is a big, I think, opportunity for just all of those senior creatives that are going to be the ones that you cannot still replace with AI. AI still doesn't replace you with your taste. Doesn't help with the way you look at things. Doesn't help with the context, because you get the context. You know what could make sense. Even if you can ask also, okay, AI, what could make sense for this industry? Okay, but you're the one, analyzing the response and then trying to adapt that to the market, to your customer, and so on. And so if you're a good designer, you're just looking at this shift. And I think the opportunity is also to address more the consulting aspect rather than just the execution. Of course, you're going to be good at the execution, and even better, I think, because you're going to be able to scale your execution much more faster.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, because I think it's important. Like, also, let's not forget, I don't know if you've seen, like, there's a lot of funny memes going around now. Where the caption is, I asked ChatGPT to recreate this image 100 times.
Okay.
And what happens is basically it deteriorates over time. So the image becomes worse and worse and worse until it becomes like this weird thing. That's what happens when like AI doesn't have new data to feed on. And actually, like, we need artists to come up with new styles, new ideas, new looks. That's because like AI is just averaging what it already knows and tries to generate it. And obviously it can create also new and interesting looks if you use it right. But still, like, we're always going to need those people to bring in new ideas. It's the same way how, again, like painting and influences photography and so on, how people still love vinyl today. Like, there's a lot of like analog and human creativity will always exist. So that's important. And I think just to pick up on the word taste, like I think taste is going to be a real differentiator here. And I think it's interesting because, like, again, Joe Burns, quoting him, he says like the sloppening is happening, where basically so many brands now have the opportunity to generate just basic generic stuff. Like it's the Ghibli thing where, all brands create a Ghibli image. It's fun. I mean, I did it too. But it's like, if you then have taste to go beyond that, take that idea and push it further and make it into something really unique, that's going to be a real differentiator in marketing. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how, like, with all this access to all these tools, that creativity is still going to push the things that need to stand out.
Yeah. And talking about taste also, I saw a bunch of new jobs, and especially I came across an agency that is called Detroit, and there are AI artists only. And it's crazy to see in the end what they do, because what they came up with, I couldn't even imagine, designing this, like crazy campaigns for luxury brands and so on. And I think, it's just all linked to what we're saying.
Yeah, and maybe just one more thing, because I think there is also another thing going to happen. On the one hand, what we'll see is, okay, like the level of quality of imagery and video overall on the internet is going to go up in a way that at least now you can just generate a beautiful illustration or photography. And that's going to be harder to stand out if you just do that. Like it used to be, you hire a photographer, you're already ahead of the person next to you. What's also going to happen, I think, is because like we're going to get so used to everything being like AI, we're going to look for like human the human element, and we're gonna overvalue things that are real. So I think what's gonna happen is like experiential marketing, physical things. We see it in advertising too, where it's like testimonials, but like
street
these
marketing.
things, it's got like ugly ads, all of these things, physical ads, physical activations. These things are gonna matter a lot. So think about that also when you're a designer or a marketer. Like, how can I play into that space where people are gonna start looking at like how like real tangible things and making content out of that again. So a lot of interesting things happening, and I'm not too worried.
Definitely. Wanted also to take this time as an opportunity for you also to talk about your project that you talked to me about, because we've been talking about 3D designs and mascots and so on. So if you can tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, so real quickly, this is a passion project. I've been working on it for over 2 years. I gradually became a bit obsessed with mascots, part because, I worked a lot on one with Alan, and I see the impact it has. I see how people respond to it, and it's so intriguing to me. And then on the other hand, there's marketing science that does research. And for example, one interesting stat is they look at brand recall, which is basically you show people a bunch of ads and then you ask them just like, hey, which ad did you see for which brand? And they see that like brand characters or mascots are 9 times more effective than, for example, a logo. So when you see an ad with a logo versus when you see an ad with a character, 9 times more chance that you recognize and remember the ad after when there was a character in there. So it's super effective. Yet, what we also see at the same time is that there is a huge decline in the use of mascots.
Yeah.
Brands are afraid to use them.
Playful, childish.
They need to be serious. They need to be perceived as high quality. And they think that doesn't match with mascots, which is interesting because, Alan, for example, we're health insurance in the first place. So you would think like, no, we don't want a furry creature, right? I mean, that would hurt our credibility.
Health insurance, you think a blue, serious,
How banks and how other insurers look like. But actually, it's what makes us like more approachable, more trustworthy in a way. So it's really interesting. And the whole documentary is basically about almost that tension between like, why are they in decline, but yet are they like one of the most effective assets? And then also I explore a bit the technology and how I think there's going to be a new rise of mascots coming for small brands that are now able to create these creatures, make them interactive. So it's not just anymore like slapping a cool creature on your packaging or your website. It's gonna be like being able to have like a creature where your customers can interact with, can talk with, like that. There's so much opportunity there. And also, as we said, like the physical part, creating toys from that. Like just one example, like at Allen, we have these peluche like things.
Teddy bear.
A teddy bear. Mm-hmm. Like the amount of people that when I talk to customers, it's always that like, oh, that sweet bear, and like I have one, and my child, it's in their like little crib and stuff, and they love it, and like it's like people become mellow and they soften up when they talk about this. So it breaks this thing where it's like you're a brand and I'm a person and you need to buy from me. So it's just so interesting to see.
Very nice. So I look forward to watching the documentary. It's going to be out this week. So I'm going to put down the link in the description, of course, for you guys to watch it and support it as much as you can. One thing I had in mind also is that we've been talking a lot about generative images and stuff, and all of that is very static. How do you go with the next phase? And I think it's already coming a bit. Have you used already some video generation stuff? And how do you plan also to use that with at Alan, for instance?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think video is now at a point that it's like highly qualitative enough to put out there in a production environment. So it's no longer just like weird things happening and very weird movement. With Alan, we're creating a lot of ads, a lot of brand videos where our mascot is like moving in a very natural way, like fully rendered. So it's like, it's here. Like, especially if people are interested in the specific tools like KLIMB, their latest model 2.0 it's just amazing. Google's VO is also really good. Like there's a bunch of models, but there's platforms like Krea and FreePic that are bundling all the models together. So I recommend like, if you want to start playing, just upload an image there, try a bunch of different generators, and you'll see that actually like the results are really good. And that's just video. Like that's one part. The whole thing that people forget when it comes to generative AI is the idea of multimodal. So it's text to image, it's image to video, it's image to sound, it's sound to video, it's sound to 3D, it's 3D to sound, it's whatever. Multimodal input output can be varied and can be combined. So you can start combining images, sound into other outputs. And even like 3D is something very interesting where again, we talked about, oh no, 3D is being replaced. Actually, what we see now, like the new Hunyan 2.5 generator is you can upload an image. It generates a realistic 3D model from it, fully textured. And you can start using that 3D model like interactively on your website. People can not just see the image. It's not even video. You can rotate around it. You can start moving, playing with it. You can start posing it. So there's going to be like a whole wave of like not just moving beyond static to video, but actually moving to interactive spaces where you can move around and interact. So yeah, I think that's what gets me even more excited, where it's not just like let's create cool videos, but let's create almost video games with our brand, or what we like to say at Alan, we want to create a brand universe where people can interact with, play with.
Super interesting. I didn't know about all of these tools. I haven't used yet video, generative stuff. I've seen like Sora, I think it was from ChatGPT, but it was like the early days. In
bit of disappointment.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty sure there are other alternatives.
Yep.
And talking about tools, do you want to share some things that you saw recently, things that you feel like are worth mentioning?
Yeah, so definitely I think like Krea is an interesting one, but it's an example of a platform that is basically bundling all image models, ChatGPT, Flux, Ideogram, all video models, but also like real-time 3D generation. Like also there's what for me is a game changer. What happened with ChatGPT is not per se the quality of the images, which is great, but it's the UI, conversational. So and Midjourney released this feature as well, where you can basically be in draft mode and you can just talk to it. And I really recommend people to try this. You open Midjourney and you go to this draft mode, and it just opens your microphone, and you start like just brain dumping. Like, I want to see an image where, a bunch of mascots are climbing a mountain. It generates 3 images very rapidly because they're like very low res.
Okay.
Then you say, no, you got it all wrong. Like, I want them in the sky, and there needs to be rainbows everywhere. And you iterate on this like in a very rapid way, and it allows you to go in different directions and just explore on the fly, like with your brain straight to the computer, which is a totally different interface than, prompting was very technical, like hyper real 4K, blah, blah, blah. Like it became this whole templated thing that doesn't allow you to be really creative because you always have to steal and copy, while this is just like straight from your brain to the generations. And I think that's where both like ChatGPT is really interesting, because you can say, now, you miscreated that image, do it in a different style, or give me that, or give me another variation. And like this conversational way is a lot like an art director and a designer working together. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Nice. I've been thinking also about what's your... I want to go back to this mascot stuff because it's very interesting. And I wanted to know about what's your process to go with. If, for instance, today at KLIMB, I have somehow a mascot. It's a small K with some arms and legs and so on. But just in general, if a brand comes to us tomorrow, what's the process? What's the step-by-step process to go with for a mascot?
Yeah. So it's a lot like what you would do normally. Like as a good strategist, like you start first understanding the category, the consumer, and the company you're working for. So just make sure you do that always, like due diligence. Like I teach strategy at the branding school in Belgium. And like, it's something we often forget. Just look at the category, look at the players, like what other mascots or codes are in the category. Make sure you understand that, because then you see the opportunities and you also see the cliches that you don't have to repeat, and you will stand out already. Make sure you understand the consumer a bit, and of course the company. What are the sensitivities? What is their safety box where they want to play, and so on. So let's get that out of the way. And then it's really like a bit of an alchemy process where, like, the thing with mascots often is like, for a mascot to work, it needs to be a bit random. Like, because if you do the obvious thing, then you will get very close to what everybody else is doing in the category. If you're selling cars and it's like a car-ish thing, then it looks like it's gonna be unmemorable. But if you're selling cars and you have like a snail for a mascot, that's interesting. And obviously there needs to be some cool link between that. Like, even just to give an example, like there's this thing, Compare the Market, which is like a UK player where you can compare car insurances.
Okay.
They have a mascot called Alexander the Meerkat.
Okay.
And the reason why that happened was just because they had a joke when you say in Russian market, or like you pronounce it in a Russian dialect, is meerkat.
Okay.
Compare the meerkat. And so that sounded like a meerkat.
Okay.
And then they created a meerkat as a character. And now they have like this whole, like, it's one of the most effective advertising tools there is, campaigns there is, where it's like compare the meerkat and you can see meerkats and stuff like that. So there is like leave room for creativity and random things to happen. But then you can start using generative AI. So what I usually do is I just start, like what I said earlier, like conversational mode, just trying out ideas. But also, and this is really an unlock that happened with me also a couple of weeks ago when I was working on one of these mascots, I just started sketching with my daughter. I said, like, I'm gonna create a monkey that has a rocket and like a whole lot of ideas. And we just started sketching ideas. And as soon as I saw a sketch that was interesting or that my daughter was like excited about, I took a photo from it. I uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, like, create me a 3D character from this. And it's fascinating to see what comes out of that. And usually, like, when you see what happens, like, that's again where I think human creativity and combination really works. And when you show that to a client, they also get a lot more excited because they still feel like there was human creativity involved. And it's stupid, but it works that way. So after the prototype, like first it's like shoot very wide and have like a lot of different interesting prototypes that you show your customer. And then once a direction is shown, you start exploring a bit more poses, colors, variations, outfits, and touch points. Like, how does it look like when we do it in a suit? How does it look like when it's a toy? How does it look like in a social media ad? Explore that universe and present it back to the client. When they like it, either you can already start training a model and they can just start using it. Or when it's like, you know, what I said earlier, big company, big stakes, very important to be 100% legally correct, then by all means go hire an illustrator or a 3D designer to basically recreate that model, that prototype you created to make sure that you're safe there. That's
Okay.
a bit the process.
Nice. I've been thinking about also Alan. Can you share maybe some exciting projects you are working on or stuff that people can relate to?
Yeah, I think I can share this, right? I'm thinking what is like, if it's possible. And anyway, I think like what we're really excited about, one thing is gamification. So we just recently relaunched like Alan Play, which is where basically people can collect berries for doing simple things like walking and like meditations and stuff. And with these berries, they can unlock stuff, they can get stuff in the shop. So that's something that is really exciting to me. And especially, again, in combination with what we said earlier about like generative AI, where people will be able to generate their own avatars and accessories and maybe start sharing and maybe start creating more interactive spaces. I think there is a lot there that I'm excited about to just market that and also see how it will grow. And obviously, side mission to get people healthier, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. We only have 5 minutes left now. So is there something else you want to share or even a question you want to ask me? Something in general?
Yeah, where do you want to climb to, Michael?
Like the vision of the agency.
Yeah.
Well, I shared a bit, of course, not to mention any other agencies, but I do want to build like an agency that is going to be there for the next 10 years at least. So that's the goal. I want us to be recognized as an expert in brand and websites. So this is the play. I know you talked about the fact that I think it's a difficult thing to be a one-stop shop for everything. So I don't think we're going to go there yet on doing ads, doing SEO, doing generative engine optimization. All of that, I think, are missions and stuff that our customers are asking already from us, because we are their main point of contact when it comes to externalization of marketing and design and stuff. But I think it's healthier as a vision for a company to just be very vertical and try to be very good at something. So the goal is to be very good at branding and very good at websites, because this is part of our DNA. I've been managing websites for a long time. I was a website manager at Spendesk. So all of that makes sense. And when you build like a proper brand, the first asset, the main asset of your company is your website. So we want to make sure that we convert the brand in a good way on the website, and at the same time try to build websites that are also scalable and that makes sense from a conversion perspective, both as well as a traffic perspective. So this is the goal. So we're growing slowly, reaching 10 people, and then we'll see how it goes.
It's really cool what you're building.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks a lot, Stef. You can have your glass of water, of course. Thanks a lot for spending this time with me. It was very, very interesting. We talked about a lot of different stuff. So from your early days, trying to just understand where you come from and how did you end up in branding and design and so on. A lot of things about just generative AI stuff, because this is your specialty now. And a lot of things about Alan also. How do you apply and see a brand evolving at Alan, and how you also scale brand topics. So that was super interesting. And so, thank you very much just for spending this time with me.
Thank you. It was so much fun being here.
So if you're watching this podcast and if you're happy with the content you get from it, feel free to have a look at all the other episodes. We have a lot more also coming your way. So please subscribe, like any YouTuber. Please subscribe to the channel, drop some likes, and of course share that on LinkedIn or other platforms. And thank you for listening and watching.